I need a little breathing room when I'm feeling crowded in the city. Need a little green and blue when I'm feeling tired and gray. Oh, I need that sweet perfume when I'm feeling maddened by the city. A place of deep refuge from the loneliness of my days. A place for the tired and worn to come and rest by the water. A place for the spirit that's torn by the weariness of life. A place for the old to be reborn, to come and rest by the water beneath the hemlock and the hawthorn, free from stress and strife. So we'll make a little breathing room for those who are crowded in the city. Leave a little green blue for those who are tired and gray. Just a little sweet perfume for those who are maddened by the city. A place of deep refuge, a place of deep refuge, a place of deep refuge from the loneliness of their days.
Hello, everybody. Time for the theme song. Woohoo!
Katie.
Katie.
Katie Dahl.
Katie Dahl.
Katie Dahl has friends.
Ooh, she has friends.
Yes, she does. She's got a friend in me.
And she's got a friend in you.
You know that, Katie.
Katie.
Katie Dahl.
Katie Dahl.
Katie Dahl has friends.
Katie Dahl has friends.
Yeah.
Woohoo! All right, that is LaCrissa Granberry and Ava Nimmer with the theme song. I am glad you're here tonight. I'm Katie Dahl. If you are joining us because you are a Danielle Kurtzleben fan, I too am a Danielle Kurtzleben fan. And all the rest of you, thanks for sticking around week after week. I am glad to see you. And if you would like to tell us in the comments where you are listening from, and or anything else you'd like us to know, I would love to see it. And if you'd like to click like or love on the video, that would help because it would get seen more. And if you'd like to click share, then you would be extra, you would get extra brownie points with me, which I know is what you're going for. So tonight our topic is teens for God. And Danielle and I are going to talk about our sort of shared background as like kind of evangelical, we'll talk more about the terminology and all that, but teenagers. And hi from Chicago, Neva, and hi from Cedar Rapids, Dorothy. And so I'm going to start with this song that's sort of like it's not really about that, but it's not really about per se that sort of background, but I think it encapsulates, it's sort of, that background is really important to this song, which is called County Line, and I wrote it from my uncle's perspective. My uncle's a Baptist minister in Alexandria, Minnesota, and this song is about Door County, Wisconsin, where I live. Mother left her cherry orchard home the day that she turned 18 years old. I hear she grew up with nimble fingers, piano player and a cherry picker, sifting through the trees for bright red gold. But that day she left to seek her fortune, crossed that county line and moved on down the road. She says there's no line quite as thin as that county line, no sin, just like leaving all behind the land of cherry trees and pine for. Baby, in my mind I'm always looking back to find that I am a pillar of white salt beyond that line. She was a pastor's wife and I am his son. He took us far from my mother's county line. Cross state lines like criminals, moving boxes full of old hymnals, glance back at all the sin we left behind. And when summer came, my mother brought us back again. There I found the only home I'll ever find, 'cause there's no line quite as thin as that county line, no sin, just like leaving all behind the land of cherry trees and pine for. Mama, in my mind I'm always looking back to find that I'm a pillar of white salt beyond that line. It's hard to believe now my mother has been 10 years gone. It's hard to believe I've got a pulpit of my own. It's hard to believe my mother's cherry trees are growing toward the sun. I feel so far down and miles away from home. Now I count the days like a blind man, counting steps on the way back to his chair. Sometimes I wish I could go back again, show my wife and kids where I really am, pick some cherries, send my mom a little prayer. And the first thing I would say to her is, how'd you ever tear yourself away from there? When there's no line quite as thin as that county line, no sin, just like leaving all behind the land of cherry trees and Where's my audience in a box? Ugh. Maybe my son. Oh, here it is. I was about to blame my son for absconding with it, but that would be unfair. Yeah, woo! All right, everybody. So now that we've had our little musical introduction, it's my pleasure to introduce to the show Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR political reporter. Woo! Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Where are you joining us from?
My apartment in Washington, D.C. And I gotta say, this might sound weird, but so when we were in college together, everyone, this is how I know Katie. We went to Carleton College together. I didn't know you were a musician. So every time I hear your music, surprised isn't the right word, but I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of her. Even though like you're an accomplished singer and musician now, I should not be. Maybe that's a weird reaction to have every damn time, but I do.
I mean, I feel that way every time you're on the radio. So same.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect. Mutual admiration society.
That's right. No, I know. And you were like, I wasn't actually I wasn't musical in a very performy way when I was at Carleton, but you were in the Accidentals, which was like big status in my mind.
No, Nightingales.
Right? Oh, Nightingales.
Wrong, all women's a cappella group. Come on.
Right.
Keep up.
Do you still sing at all? Like, I mean, not now probably, but
not really. No, and I miss it. There was a largely ex-Carleton a cappella group I was a part of here in DC for a short while called the Potonix. It's a good name.
So clever.
Yeah. But at this point, no, I am, and I imagine we are going to get into our current church habits. I go to a church with my partner, Neil, and the choirs there are incredible. And so I've told him over and over, dude, when this is over, when we can be in person again and sing with other people, I'm joining those choirs. I am so excited. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have been lucky to sing with other people more than the average person in this pandemic because we've done some like distance things, outside things, whatever. But still like, it's so rare, and it's an amazing thing to sing with other people, or even to just sing with people in the room. You know, it's a very, and it was always one of my favorite parts about church. Actually, is the singing and the music.
Yes, 1,000%. At least in that way, the pandemic has been. I mean, you look for silver linings where you can get them. In that way, I guess the pandemic has been clarifying and like, oh, that's the thing I really want to do. Like what are the things you absolutely can't wait to do after this? Well, not like I don't miss loud live rock shows or anything that much, but I honestly I miss singing with people like quite a bit. So that's a thing I'll definitely do.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of singing in church, what is like, can you tell me, because I have this like, we bonded, I really remember strongly over Brio magazine.
Right.
But like, and we'll for sure 100% talk about Brio magazine. But I guess I don't actually know a lot about like what church tradition you grew up in. Can you tell me?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up ELCA. When people in DC don't know what that is, I say Garrison Keillor Lutheran. Like, ELCA stands for Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. But as I have learned in my reporting career, which I did not realize, it is not generally categorized with the other even white evangelical churches like Baptists and Christian Reformed and that sort of thing. It's considered mainline, but so I grew up ELCA, but also in a pretty, I call it like evangelical adjacent, because I also went to youth groups with my friends and Bible camps and national youth gatherings with all of the Christian rock and all of the, what was the book about courtship? Joshua Harris.
It was, oh yeah, Kiss It Goodbye, or
no. I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Yeah.
All of those trappings. See You at the Pole, 40-Hour Famine. All of those.
See You at the Pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of those things were very familiar to me. So I got my share of all of those, but I wasn't fully in the evangelical tradition. But I got plenty of it, and that sort of ended up being sort of what I was steeped in. Yeah.
Yeah. And was
Yeah.
that ELCA like was there a youth group there that did some of those activities or not so much?
Not so much, but I mean, the church I went to was quite small, and by the time I was in high school, like barely had enough people where a youth group would have made sense. And also, it was in a different town from where I went to high school. Like this is middle of nowhere, Iowa, where I went to church in one town and high school in another, and it was two entirely separate groups of people. And all my friends were over here at the high school, so I went to the youth group with them. So that's how I kind of fell into that sort of stuff. So yeah, my church didn't have a lot of people, and also my parents were like, my mom was the organist and my dad was the president, and so like they were keeping the place running. And often we were the only kids in church, like at church service. So we were the youth group occasionally. So yeah.
Like that's interesting because it makes me think that like I went to a Baptist church, and we had my youth group. I went to other people's youth groups. I had my friends come along to my youth group, and it was like very much a social thing. Like, and it was often like framed as good for it to be a social thing, right? Because you were supposed to like evangelize. I mean, it's evangelism light, right? But it's like you're supposed to invite people, and like it was good if you brought an unsaved friend along to like a weekend retreat, and hopefully they could be saved, by the end of the weekend was the hope. And like, or more open, or something. But like,
Yeah.
I think part of the appeal for me of all this, like part of why I got more drawn into it, is because it was like in high school, your friends are the most important thing, like becoming friends. And
Right.
and it was kind of like a social lubricant in a way. Like it was like there were activities that you could bring friends to, and the other kids had to be, I mean, they weren't always for sure, but everyone had to be nice to each other more or
Mhm.
less, So I don't know, like that's interesting. It was such a social thing.
It was, and yet, I mean, everyone had to be nice to each other. I mean, you and I know teenage girls. Teenage girls find a way to not be nice, even in the context of youth group. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, and boys, and teenage boys too, don't you
True.
think? Yeah.
Oh God, totally true. They're just, yes, I do not mean to put girls worse than boys there. I just mean the boys are more overt. At least the adults get after the boys, because the boys are being jackasses over here, but the girls are quietly getting under your
Quietly mean.
poisoning you emotionally. So,
Right.
anyway, yeah, and I one other thing that I would say about it is like a major. I mean, I know you know this. Teen youth groups at these churches so often center around sex, by which I mean the lack of sex, how you should not be having it, and you should not be doing things even remotely in that realm, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mean to, we can talk more about the merits of that. I don't mean to say there are none, but I mean, to me, part of it was also that, like, look, I was not super popular. I was not the most attractive person to the opposite sex either. And so I remember being like, oh, this is a place for me. They don't want me to have sex. I'm in no danger of that.
Perfect.
Cool. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here. I belong here. And I mean, I say it jokingly now, but I mean, finding a place you belong when you're 16 is important as hell, and it gave me that. So I mean, that's why I find this a complicated conversation, because it's really easy to go, man, youth group screwed me up. And there's plenty, like, look, a lot of the rhetoric could and should be changed. But like, I find it hard to poo-poo it too much, and it's really easy to get into that, like, yeah, man, too much trauma from my religious upbringing, Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I there's this quote, I don't even remember who said it, but like plain girls are virtuous, by default, or something like that. Like, and I've read that and I was like, me, like, like it did, all of that obsession, and it really was all about sex and all about abstinence. I mean, everything, everything was about, like, I actually found this quote. I was Googling about Brio magazine, which we will talk about, but Ruth Graham described it as a relationship. Brio included a relationship advice column about not having premarital sex, a culture column about not listening to music about premarital sex, and interviews with young Christian celebrities who were not having premarital sex. And it's like everything really was like so centered around that. And it also gave me not a place to belong, and also a place to feel like valuable for my lack of sexiness, rather than like bad about it. You know, like, which I also felt bad about it, but I totally get that, that complication too.
Yeah. And I mean, the flip side though, is also that, like, you know, I was the other part of growing up Christian, and I am not familiar with other faith traditions, maybe just an every religion thing, but it's like you're always trying to be a better Christian, right? Like there's always more you could be doing. And so I remember distinctly, and this is really, I think, how my faith started evolving, was mid to late teens. I started being like, okay, cool. We've talked about sex a lot. Check. I feel like I've got that down. Can we please talk about something like, how should I act toward my friends? How should I act toward my teachers? What is honoring my parents supposed to mean? And we never got that. It was just always, hey, are you making out? Don't make out. You know, like, tell me more about how to grow my faith. No, just don't have sex. Like, that was a huge frustration for me eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I felt like our youth group had a lot of emphasis. Like, I was trying to think, we had like dual emphases, like on no sex, and on also on like the infallibility of scripture slash the paramount nature of salvation. Like a sort of like the other main thing I got from youth group was this is the most important thing. And by this, I mean, whatever we say, like, and digging deeper into like, well, you know, I remember my youth leader saying like, all scripture is God. I asked a question and my youth leader said, all scripture is God breathed. And I said, okay, but that doesn't mean I understand it, you know, I want to know what it means, like, you know, like, so I felt like there was a big, like, in my experience, there was also a big push of, like, you must accept, and not for my family, I just like to say,
right. Same here, actually. I also stress we both seem to get this from external forces.
Yeah. But like you must sort of accept this monolith, and what that meant in a complex way was not to be really interrogated in any sort of with any sort of rigor. Yeah, and I felt frustrated about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, how did you feel then? Like, well, let's talk about Brio magazine. I was going to move to college, but like Brio was before college. Can you tell us about Brio magazine and what it was?
Sure. Brio magazine was essentially the conservative Christians, I think it's fair to say, response to magazines like 17 and YM and teen magazines, all of those. It was, I believe it was, I'm 95% sure it was put together and published by Focus on the Family.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, and which, to those watching who don't know what it is, it's a major Colorado-based organization was run by a guy named James Dobson, and it played a huge part in the moral majority and sort of the Christian right and the Republican Party becoming good friends in the 1980s, I think is a pretty loose way to put it. There's better history out there. Go find it. Anyway, Brio magazine jump in if you want. There's a lot to say here. Like Brio magazine gave you beauty tips, what to listen to tips, what to watch, and also Bible study lists, suggested Bible study verses, that sort of thing for you to read as a good, virtuous teenage girl. And a lot of the music and movies tips did tend to tell you to sort of eschew what was popular. A lot of like hip hop, no good. This, boy band that sings about vaguely sexual things, no good. That sort of thing. I still have bits of it burrowed into my brain. I remember the music column dissecting No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom. Because I remember they decided that some songs are good and are about like that Just a Girl is, it's about you being a strong girl. But some of these songs, I don't know, they seem a little risque. So it was a lot of that. And also, of course, a heavy dose of, having godly relationships with boys and always boys, of course. And,
Right.
And not having sex and all of that. So there was a lot there. And of course, the editor's note every month from Susie Schellenberger.
Susie Schellenberger, founder of The Feast. I mean, like, right. So she had an advice column. And she, you would be like, my boyfriend wants to have sex with me, but I told him I can't because you're not supposed to, but he said he'll wait, but should I make him wait? Because I kind of want to have sex. Signed, wondering. And then it would be like, why are you even with this man who wants to have sex with you? Like that you can find a better person, like, get better man. Get the most. I'm trying to remember what other topics were covered, because the sex one's really Ouija boards.
I do think Ouija
like the
boards.
Occult was a theme to be avoided.
Yeah. I believe I recall friendship was discussed to some degree, but similarly to some of the dating stuff, like my friends aren't Christian, but I am, or like my friend is this other religion. Is she going to go to hell? Like that. Yes. I remember that was a question that came up some. I also remember distinctly, I had never thought about let's get back to sex. I had never thought about the choice to remain celibate until marriage long term. And I remember one Ask Susie column had her saying, I'm maybe 50, 45, I don't know. I'm 50 years old and I still have my true love waits ring on. And I remember my teenage brain went, whoa, oh, some people wait that long. And that was like, my brain broke for a second, like, oh, I might have to wait that long. And like this was just I don't know. It was like a new world opened up to me, like that's dedication. Do I have that? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
A big function of Brio magazine, and I think of this upbringing, was a lot of, am I constitutionally capable of being the kind of Christian I'm supposed to be? And fairly often the answer was no. Was that a thing for you? Because there were so often where I knew of friends who went to a couple kids at my school went to a church where they spoke in tongues. And I remember thinking, one, they must be a better Christian than me, but two, that sounds like not my jam, and I don't really want to do that. So am I bad? And I wrestled with that a lot. Was that a thing you had, or not really?
Well, I had a lot of wrestling with with prayer and like hearing the voice of God, and thinking that I should be experiencing some sort of direct God communication that I didn't experience, and like writing in journals. Like I find journals from church camp that are like, "Dear God, I know you're trying to talk to me, but I can't listen," or like, I'm trying to listen, but I feel really bad for that self, like who's like feels bad about, her inability to listen well. And so I worried about my ability to do a good job. I mean, very achievement based in my life, right? Like as probably many of us who went to Carleton College, are. Like I was like I will do a good job, and I think like that I didn't feel. And you know what else I felt, what did make me uncomfortable was like outright evangelizing. Like we went on several like missions trips that were work trips. Like we went to Mississippi, we went to West Virginia, and like we would paint houses or whatever, but like at night we were supposed to like hang out with the local kids and like tell them about Jesus. And like that, I felt that I really reacted negatively to internally. It felt like I felt uncomfortable, but I felt like that was a time when I felt like, oh yeah, I need to do a better job. I felt like I wasn't measuring up. Yeah.
Same. I was never good at that side of things, and I honestly can't remember a time I did it.
Right. I don't know if I did either. I even went on a trip to Ukraine, like a missions trip to Ukraine, and I was supposed to I went to schools and I was supposed to talk to them about Jesus and drugs, and I talked to them about like Thanksgiving and Halloween. Like, love Jesus and don't do drugs. And I was like, actually, in Halloween, what we do is we go around to all the different houses and we get candy.
Even better. That's close enough to the drug talk. It's fine.
Yeah, right. Sugar is a drug. But back to Susie Schellenberger. Like,
yes.
I have so my narrative of Susie, like my my retrospective narrative, which is she's a real person, and
yes.
I don't at all want to be unkind.
No.
It feels to me like queerness and LGBT issues were also sort of lurking in the background of all this stuff. And I think like gayness was just like when we were in high school, right? Like did Ellen came out like
I think when we were in middle school, Ellen came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was the beginning, I think, of that whole explosion of like LGBT stuff becoming more visible.
Right.
And I felt like I had a middle school youth leader say, I hate gay people. I can't stand being around them. And I remember that very clearly. And Susie Schellenberger, like, if I had to guess, like the narrative I've made up of her in my mind is like closeted gay woman who has found her place. And it says more about my own, it says nothing about her because I don't know anything about her, but it says something about the way that I perceived queerness and non okay sexual behavior to kind of be subverted or closed off or whatever in that world.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is you bring up a good point in terms of the this is a thing we have not touched on, that LGBT, and you know what, the T wasn't even a thing that was talked about much back then, if at all. It was gay issues were also a huge thing back then because there was Ellen and there were more Hollywood stars who are escaping me right now. Like Anne Heche, I think might have.
Oh yeah.
Been.
Well, she dated Ellen, right?
That was it.
Ellen's first public girlfriend. Yeah.
And then Will and Grace was on TV and people actually liked it. And oh my gosh, there's a gay person in popular culture. And so all of these things were happening, and you could tell that Brio was wrestling with it, as were lots of Christians. I mean, I remember myself having the struggle of, like, first of all, I didn't know anyone who was openly gay. No one in my town was, as far as I know. And if anyone watching this wants to correct me, by all means. And so I didn't have to think about this sort of thing, or at least I didn't think I did. But I remember having the thought, that seems like a mean rule, but also, and I want to stress, I was a teenager and I didn't know anything. I was like, but I guess them's the rules. And it just seemed like, well, I guess that's what God said, apparently, for arbitrarily, sure. It was, and speaking of later faith crises, that was a big one eventually. Like, how is that a rule? That's insane. And you talk about a youth group leader saying, I hate gay people. That is not I'm willing to bet that is not rhetoric you hear much, even at quite conservative churches these days. Even churches that, maybe don't ordain gay people. Like that is like we've already moved relatively far from that, if not, if
I
not a
totally think
180
so.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, I think that like the message I got was one of dividing orientation from behavior, and like that was a way for it to feel not as mean.
Mhm.
Like, and you can think it's okay to have those attractions but not to act on them. Like was the
Right.
sort of message that I picked up as a way to be less mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you came to Carleton, which
Mhm.
in my experience was like a sort of militantly secular place. Like, what
Yes.
was your experience like? Like, did you have any culture shock
Oh yeah.
there?
Yeah. So one of I distinctly remember one of this woman who is now one of my best friends. Her name is Rachel. Uh, she was the first Jew I ever met, and she was on my floor at Carleton. And so I was like, "Holy cow! Someone who's Jewish! Tell me all about your faith." And she was like, "Well," and I remember her and lots of other Jewish people telling me, "Well, I don't practice." And first of all, that blew my mind. Like, oh, you could be a part of a religion without practicing it. Like, just figuring that out already melted my brain. But I remember her coming into my dorm room as a freshman and seeing that I had the Good News Bible on my shelf, and she was like, "Can I read this?" And I was like, I guess." And so she flipped through it, and she was like, "This is fascinating." And I just remember being stunned that she was stunned at my Bible and going, "Oh, this is how different of a place I'm in, where people that's just not people here." No, it was a huge culture shock, and it was also hard. I felt weird, and also I felt like the odd person out, and for and this was one of many ways. I was a rural kid, a farm kid. I was not. Um, there were lots of things that people who went to better schools than I did growing up knew and participated in. And I had AP courses, and I was like, what's an AP course? That sort of stuff. So I already felt very adrift from everyone else, and this was one additional way I did. So yeah, it was uncomfortable, and also then, like, I was also kind of wrestling with what I believed. So this added to that. There was plenty of angst to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have that
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, I did. I felt like I had always been the sort of intellectual rabble rouser of my youth group. Like, I was the one who asked questions like, how can it be that that everyone else is going to hell, or whatever. Those were questions that I asked.
Right.
And so I felt like I had always been a lefty among among conservatives. And then I got to Carleton, and I was like, oh, like I am not as far left as you. Like it was suddenly, and
Bunch
I
of
felt like there
hippies.
was, yeah. And I felt like there was a lot of like anti I I don't know if this was perceived or real, but I felt like there was a lot of anti-Christian sentiment that I picked up on, and that I felt very defensive of my my family and roots.
Very, 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 yes. And yet, I remember there were different Christian groups on campus that also I didn't quite feel I fit in with, and they were lovely. Like, there was a praise band, and there was a there was, I think it was called Fish House. It was the house that
Oh yeah, Fish House.
it was
Yeah.
an interest house that Christian people lived in, and I remember like going to their nights, and like there was one night we all watched Dogma together. The Kevin Smith movie that shook our faiths when we were in high school. And I remember like listening to the discussion and being like, well, I'm not as devout as these people, but I'm way more religious than everyone else. And so I felt like I was in this gray religious area where I like going to chapel services sometimes, but I'm not too straight-laced about it. And so that also made me wonder, well, what am I even doing? If I'm not black or white, then I'm just in this sloppy middle,
Right. Which I think is is I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but I think it's good for building character. Like, I mean, I would say like that sort of has that experience has served me well in like the Trump era. Like I feel like I am I mean, or maybe it's been tested in the Trump era. Like maybe until then, like I guess I've always felt like I can be a kind of a bridge that I'm not part of
Hmm.
that evangelical world anymore, but I respect it and I see it and I sort of understand it on a cellular level, even if I can't always articulate what I
Yeah.
understand about it.
Yeah.
And I defend it like I've always felt defensive of humans and like who are, you know, in any way and in my the left circles that I run in, that is often people on the right who I feel like I grew up with. So I guess I don't know. So I guess like I think about that Carleton experience of feeling not here and not there a lot, and I have thought about it a lot more in the last 5 years as everything sort of becomes so much more intense.
Yeah. And I mean, I selfishly, I'll say it's all kind of helped me as a reporter because my strategy when I was, around people who maybe may not understand me or I don't understand them, or I'm sort of caught in the middle of non-religious and quite religious, and I'm neither. My strategy tended to be, I think, if I'm not remembering myself too kindly, keep your mouth shut and ask questions respectfully, which is honestly a lot of what being a reporter is, you know, if you keep your mouth shut when you're talking to someone about a thing, especially, and this is, I mean, like non-expert people, voters I meet at a rally or whatever, if you keep quiet, people will keep talking. And honestly, it's when you don't pepper people with questions that they tend to open up more. And yeah, also the fact that I have, yes, here in DC, it's uh, safe to say that, yeah, DC, it is a city full of college educated people. I don't run in super religious circles here, although I do go to a church with my partner and we can get into that. So when I'm out and about in the world among people who are more religious and more conservative Christian in particular, yeah, my life experiences with Stephen Curtis Chapman, and but also just like talking about like the language of being saved and the language of righteousness and Christ and all of that is like, it's a language I speak. It's in there. And so I feel at least conversant when I'm talking to a voter who's talking about that. And I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. It's not a thing that I feel alienates me or that I feel like I need to ask further questions on. I feel like, oh, I get that. I get where you're coming from. Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah.
Yeah. It really does feel like a language in that respect, or like a culture in the same way that you meet like a fellow American when you're overseas and you feel like, oh, like, like I get this with you. We have this shared ground. Like I feel
Right.
that way. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and
sort
not
of
only
fluency.
that, but it's also easy to, and I say this as, for example, a person who is from Iowa. I'm going to use Iowa as an example. So every time the caucuses come around, I get a little annoyed. I mean, assuming the Iowa caucuses still happen, and after the 2020 mess, who knows? But every 4 years, the Iowa caucuses happen, and I think, God, reporters treat Iowans like zoo animals. Like, look at the Iowans. We are at the state fair. They eat fried foods, and there are pigs. This is crazy. Like, all right, cool your jets. So when, by which I mean when we big city, urban, often East Coast reporters go hang out in cultures that we are not familiar with or that we don't hang out in out here, it is easy to turn people into zoo animals. And so that's a thing that I try not to do, because also this is a thing that we saw after Trump was elected also, right? With the constant, like, I went to a diner in such and such, or we went and talked to conservative Christians to ask what are they thinking, and like just calm down, okay? Like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a jerk, but like, no, this is even if you thoroughly don't agree with the worldview, and even if you think these people are being hypocritical, blah blah blah, like which go ahead, debate that. I mean, there's an amount of respect you have to give to religious beliefs, I think, in terms of like, look, this is what a person has built their life around, and if you're going to interrogate it, you have to do it with a sense of, I'm not saying kid gloves, but at least empathy. And
Yes.
I feel like I feel like I do have a bit of empathy from this upbringing, is what I'm saying, and this and having been in these churches and youth groups and all of that. Like, no, I understand when like that is sort of the, I don't know, the tent pole that your life is organized around. It is an not insubstantial thing.
Right. Well, and in a lot of ways, I feel like I have created my own dogma and co-created it with my friends and people
Yeah.
whose politics I'd agree with more. You know, like it is not that I'm free of dogma or of judgmentalism or any of the things that I, you know, what that might be associated with the religious right. Like it's just that
Mhm.
my dogma has changed. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm dogmatic about different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, also it strikes me that every church or every denomination or what have you sort of has its own uh, system of things to its own sort of constellations of the things that matter, perhaps. Like, for example, I worked at a UCC church in Minneapolis for a while. I am now part of a UU church out here. And, you know, the same way that perhaps, again, I'm going to bring up Stephen Curtis Chapman, the same way that he or James Dobson or whatever was a big deal at this church, Mary Oliver is a big
Yeah.
deal at this church. Like there are always those sort of central people, or like the church I went to in Minneapolis, Emily Dickinson popped up in a lot of sermons. Like this is just these conversations, these churches, any given church has its own sort of solar system of things that matter and of cultural reference points is maybe what I'm saying. I've gotten
Yeah.
off topic of whatever you just asked, but
No, I love it. It's totally true. It's totally true.
Yeah.
But I do think it's time for us to have a bite of our snack, which I'm hoping you can tell us about. And then tell us about the snack that you chose.
All right. Oh, it is stuck to the paper towel, which is this is a hallmark of a good Scotcheroo. So we are having Scotcheroos. I gave Katie my mother's recipe for them. Yes.
Mm,
Wait, there's my camera. There we go. Okay. So it is you can see the layers here. It is a peanut butter Rice Krispie bar made with peanut butter and Karo corn syrup. Very important. I instructed Katie, you can't use the corn syrup they sell at Whole Foods, the organic, whatever. It doesn't, it yields subpar results. And then on top, it's kind of frosted with melted chocolate and butterscotch chips. They're delicious. They were at many a church fellowship hour after service when I was growing up. So yeah, they're the best.
I love it. Yeah, they are the best. They're super good. I doubled my chocolate in a pandemic and impulsive move. Like, I think I didn't spread it well enough. So then I had all these corners that weren't chocolated. And I was like, well, I will just make some more melted chocolate. So while Danielle's eating, I'm going to tell everyone about some things. First of all, you don't have to tip. But if you want to tip, I would never say no. And here is the way that you can tip. And tonight, 10% of proceeds are going to the Capital Area Food Bank, which is, Danielle tells me, the main food bank in the DC area. So that is great. This is, I think, the 4th week running that we've had a food bank as the
cool.
beneficiary of the tips, which is, I think, so great. And I wanted to tell you folks that you may find out. I follow Danielle on Twitter, and she's very Twitter famous. Like you have a blue check.
Let's not overstate this.
I mean, you're the only person I know personally with a blue check, and also, you're great on you're great on Twitter, so you deserve to be Twitter famous. Twitter, you can at Tatanka, which is that the town in Iowa that you're from?
That is the town I'm from. Yeah.
Yeah,
It is, I
my
believe, a Sioux word. It is a Native American word for buffalo. Yeah.
my
Oh, yes.
mother-in-law was asking if you were from northern Iowa or what part of Iowa is that in?
Very northern, almost
Uh-huh.
Minnesota, like right on the border. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Do you know Lake Mills? That my husband went to middle school in Lake Mills.
Yeah. They were
Yeah.
in my high school athletic conference. Yeah. We
Oh,
played basketball against Lake Mills. Yeah.
oh, awesome. um, okay, and also you could subscribe to Danielle on Substack. I just did this. And I don't really understand Substack, but it's like a newsletter thing, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, different people use it more or less seriously. I do it just periodically. Hey, I wrote a thing. Hey, here's an essay I wrote that is not news. It's more of a personal thing. Maybe you would like to read it. Other journalists do it more like a paid subscription and write it once or twice weekly. Mine is a very loose Substack, and it is not.
uh-huh.
It's free. You don't have to pay. Just read my writing and tell me it's good. That's all I'm asking.
So she asks people.
Boom.
uh, boom. Okay, good. So, Danielle, am I right that you went to divinity school?
No, I meant to
Oh,
correct you in your email, but it doesn't
okay.
matter. No, I was considering it for a while though. That
Okay.
church I mentioned that I worked at, it was that was what, 2006, 2007. And at the time, it was a UCC church in Minneapolis, and it did a lot of like homelessness outreach and lots of good things. It was lovely. Also, I taught the sex ed curriculum there. The any UCC or UU people out there might know it as OWL, which stands for Our Whole Lives. It's a genuinely comprehensive and really well done curriculum teaching teenagers about, okay, not just here are STDs and pregnancy, but also like here's the emotional side of sex. We did a breakup role play one day where we taught people
Oh,
how to.
wow.
I know, it was really great. But anyway, that church at the time was, it had 5 ministers, only one of whom identified as straight. And I remember thinking, it is possible to be a good Christian and not just okay with gay people, but out there saying, yes, gay people belong in the faith. And that, I've talked about brain breaking moments. That was another one where I was like, that seems like a nice thing to do. And that kind of pushed me towards wanting to go to divinity school at the time. It seemed like a really nice doesn't state it enough, but like a lovely thing to do, a lovely way to sort of push our faith to make it more inclusive. So that was a thing I was thinking about at the time. And I'll be honest, I still do think about wanting to go. But, and when I burn out on journalism, I always joke I will. But I remember like sort of having this crisis of journalism, being a pastor. Which do I do? And then I thought, well, which would be easier to switch to in the middle of my life? And then I thought, well, plenty of people switch to becoming pastors after the age of 40 or 50. No one switches to becoming a journalist after the age of 40 or 50. So let's try this first and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll move on, So still journalizing. Whenever I'm done, I guess I'll go be a sermon writer somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, my Allie Scott, who is a pastor, says if you like brain breaking moments, divinity school is the place to be.
It
And
sounds
it's
like
true.
it.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like I feel like I come from a long line of pastors and like many uncles, my grandparents, like my mom's a seminary professor, but like many of my uncles are ministers, and my grandpa's a minister, and like
I didn't
just
know this.
oh yes, very pastory.
Wait, so you're not exactly a preacher's kid, it sounds like, right? Or you
My
are?
dad was a pastor, but not
Oh,
like in my not in my conscious like life. Like he
okay.
left that career when I was really young. But yes, I technically am a preacher's kid, and I'm a preacher's and my husband is a preacher's kid, and I am in a
Oh,
lot
nice.
of like functional ways. In like, to me, it feels like I know my mom spoke at a lot of churches. I feel like I've always like known the interior workings of churches in the way that a pastor's kid might.
Sure.
But like, I think sometimes in my own job about like the ways in which being a musician is kind of like entering the clergy in a certain way. Like similarly, you know, sort of put your thoughts together and like present them to people, and you may consider music a ministry or you may not, or you know, but like to me it feels a lot like they're all sort of teaching professions in that like you know, rabbi teacher sort of tradition. Do you feel like that at all about journalism? Like, do you see, it's interesting to me that you saw that those two choices. Like, do you see journalism as pastoriness in at all?
That's a very good question. I have never once thought about the parallels between the two careers I considered. I mean, my gut instinct initially is like, well, no, because you know, part of what we do as journalists is, you know, I joke to my friends, like, I don't get to have opinions, which, haha, but no, it's like I assemble facts and I tell a story. But then again, yes, pastors are storytellers, as am I. And now that about halfway through your question, after I got over my knee-jerk reaction, I was thinking, well, there is something there, because journalism is about, you know, assembling the facts and telling what happened, but also it is not an amoral profession. And I mean amoral as separate from immoral. Like, for example, we believe in truth, and we are attempting to tell the truth about what is going on in our world, which is a thing that I think pastors are also trying to do, and helping people. Pastors try to help people make sense of the world in this way, and often in a very personal way. I certainly couldn't tell you that my stories, that my news articles or anything like that personally move people. But for example, I've written a lot about a thing I feel passionately about, which is how masculine and especially straight white masculine American politics are. And I think that is a very important truth. And it's a thing I feel like I can sermonize on, but I feel like that sort of thing where you find a truth and you just emphasize the hell out of it. Yeah, that's the thing that some pastors do as well. It is not there's not necessarily a rigid or even non-rigid faith structure that goes with it, except for we are trying to present what is not just what is factual, but what is true. And I guess there is that parallel. And so now I feel much more like my job is doing some sort of deep work in the world. So thank you, Katie.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, you know, like when I think about journalism, I think a lot about my my narrative theory class. Did you take narrative theory with Susan Jarrett McKinstry senior year?
Yes, I think we took it together. Yeah.
I think that was my favorite college class. I think about it. I mean, Susan is my favorite, and I know you went to London with her, right? Were you on her London program? Yeah. I seem to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think about narrative theory so much when I don't know anything about journalism other than what I have, you know, gleaned, but like I think about when I consume so much of it, right? Especially like and like different I listen to so many podcasts and you know, whatever, and I think a lot about the way that we learned in that class that like there is not an objective telling, like you're always choosing what to include and what not to include. Like by creating the length of a story, you have asserted, you know, you've asserted something. You've decided what's important to say or not. You've already created a sort of truth about it. So I think that's not really about being a pastor or not, but like that, it makes me, it's like just making me go to my English, you know, our shared English major thing too.
No, but like, I know we have to wrap up soon here, and I don't want, you know what, that's your job. But a thing that I think about from that class all the time is there was a particular reading we did about the difference between a chronicle and a narrative, and how, like, the example it used was like I'm going to get terminology wrong, but how like medieval monks would chronicle what happened. Like in 1348, King such and such ascended to the throne and there was a flood and 40,000 people died of the plague. I don't know. I'm making things up. And in 1349, then this happened. And how it was just a list of events. And how I think about that all the time because, like, that is not a narrative. That's just a list of shit that happened. Whereas, like, my job is, and not just my job, I imagine pastors do this to some degree too. Anybody who talks about the state of the world does this, like, is to string things together and make careful decisions about, okay, did the king ascending to the throne cause 40,000 people to die of the plague? What are the differences? What are the connections between these things? Is it fair for me to connect these two things? I have to connect something because I have to tell a story. And if I don't have things to connect, there is no story. And then I don't do it. No, I think about that class all of the time, probably in ways our professors didn't even realize anybody would. What, nearly 20 years later, dear God.
Yeah. Totally. I love that class so much. I think about it a lot as a songwriter too, because a song is such a compact, it has to be such an efficiently told story.
Yes.
Like,
well, and often folk songs, I was listening to some of yours today, like folk songs are often story songs in ways that like folk songs, country songs especially, I think often tell stories. Like there's a whole arc to it with choruses interspersed. Yeah.
Right. Well, and ideally the choruses would change, their meaning would be different every time you hear it. I mean, that's my goal.
Yeah.
Like, and like you're always choosing, like one of my favorite songwriters is Anais Mitchell. I don't know. She wrote Hadestown, the play, but she's also like a songwriter. Anyway, she said, once, she's like, you have to really choose your images carefully, because sometimes if you have an image, the wrong image in a song, it can like really overwhelm the rest of the song. Like you can't, if you have like a highway means something, like that's a powerful, potent spiritual force in our, collective American imagination, like and if you have the highway in the song and the highway's not supposed to be in the song, it will like take over the song in a bad way. And like, that's kind of, it's kind of similar to a news story in a way, right? Like if you put something into that story that makes it feel like I don't know, if you put something in that story that's not supposed to be there, it can really derail.
Yeah, no, what I mean, and this is may sound anathema to perhaps some of the reporters watching this, and if so, I'm sorry, but like there is, to some degree, I feel like after having done this, I've done this about 11 years, and at this point, I feel like I can feel bodily when something is wrong with the story I have written. Like, no, this doesn't feel right. I can't tell you what quite yet. But like there's a splinter like stuck under my skin. There's something here it's not that it's not factual, it's just that it doesn't belong there. And then it's just the process of what do I do? How do I get that out? Like that's, and that will sort of take over the story in a way that, the wrong highway can take over a song. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, I have loved this so much.
This was so much fun. Oh my God.
Yeah, I thought so too. I loved it. And I'm so grateful to all of you for coming and listening. You've been very fun commenters. I'm going to look, I can't always pay super attention to the comments when it's happening, but mainly they think you're great at empathy and they're following you as they're supposed to. So that's, and my friend Nancy says her high school friend became a minister at 45. So that's, you're set. No worries.
I can still do it. It'll be easy.
Lots of time.
No worries.
Yeah. I'm gonna close with a song, but you're off the hook to eat your scotcheroo and and drink your wine. And thank you very much for your time. I'm so glad you came on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Katie. It's an honor.
Yeah, you're welcome. See you later. That was so great. I'm gonna play this song that I feel like is like, I think about prayer a lot in my, because I grew up with such a prayer background, And this is a song that I kind of feel like fits there. It's called Tapestry. Why do you ask when I'm so young how I believe my days will run? I can tell you I'm afraid of all the dark I see. The way folks fall before their time, the way coyotes call from the tree line, the way things are, and the way they cease to be. Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love. The summer heat, the wooden bed, September wheat, the village dead, all the kindness in the kitchens and the corner store. How you whistle in the yard, all the thistle and the chard. They fly as fast as children out the door. Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love. If you could ask me when I'm old, how do you turn the days to gold? How do you make a friend of time as he goes walking by? Well, looking back, it's hard to say just how day leads on to day. But I can tell you how the light looks in July. Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love. So when the sight falls from her eyes, when the light falls from the sky, when the wind leaves all that summer spread across the lawn, maybe the lucky ones can see a bright and ragged tapestry, how it hangs there in the air, just like smoke or like a prayer, the way it shines and the way that it is gone. Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love. Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love, will you stay? Oh, my love. Woo! Well, thanks everybody. I will see you next week. I hope Eric Lewis, multi-instrumentalist from Memphis, is my guest. And 2 weeks from now, it's going to be great if you like tonight. We're talking about hymns with my friend Gina Forsyth, who's an awesome fiddler songwriter from New Orleans. And Friday, I'm playing a show with my friends Bruce Kaplan and Claudia Russell via the Devil Mountain Coffee House in California. That'll be super fun. It's my birthday, so come and celebrate my birthday with me. And here we go. It's the outro song. Thanks everyone for coming. See you next week.
Katie Dahl.
Katie Dahl has friends.
Katie Dahl has friends.
Yeah.